Welcome to Midi Quest XL's file conversion window. This window offers an extensive selection of options to allow you to convert files, sysx files, or sysx data stored in another file format into Midi Quest file format. Now, in order to do this, you need a number of pieces of information. The first thing you need is a Midi Quest driver so that Midi Quest knows what kind of data file you're trying to create. The other thing that is required is a conversion macro. This is a macro that basically knows how to load the files that you have stored on disk into Midi Quest, extract the sysx data from the file, and write a Midi Quest format file back onto the disk. So there's quite a bit of different things to cover here. So the first thing we need to do is get a Midi Quest driver. Now, to do that, you can either go to the convert menu here, or I will be right-clicking most of the time and accessing the pop-up menu. And you'll see there are two different options: load driver from disk, load driver from list. If you want to use load driver from list, then what you do is go to your studio window, select the kind of data that you know the file that you're trying to convert contains. Say you know that it's a DX7 voice bank, so choose DX7 voice bank here, ensure the instrument is selected. Then you can say load driver from list, and under convert to, you will now see the driver loaded with the standard extension for that driver. If you want to go in and load a different driver later, then you can just choose another one, choose load driver from list, and it will be loaded back in. But we'll work with the voice bank for now. The alternative is to choose load driver from disk. In this case, when you choose it, you'll get a file selector window which automatically starts you off in your driver window, in your instrument folder. And it's then just a matter of going into the instrument and finding and loading the driver that you want to do the conversion. Say you've got an O1W combi file or files that you want to convert, you can do that, open it up, and you'll see that the driver for an O1W combination has been loaded along with its default extension. I'm going to jump back to the DX7 here, load that in from the list. Now, the other thing you need to do is have a conversion macro. Now, you can actually create this manually using SoundQuest's macro language, or particularly if you know that the file is in, say, an SYX format, then you can actually have Midi Quest itself try and create the conversion for you. So what you can do here is there's a button that will automatically create a MIDIX macro that will do the conversion. What this does is, DS stands for disk seek. This is where the macro is placed. It says disk seek 0, so open and go to the beginning of the data file, and then you're going to disk read DR from disk 4,104 bytes and place them in the data starting at byte 0. Once you have the macro, then you can actually convert as many different files as you want, or as you have. So that's one way to do it, and it automatically creates a MIDIX macro. I'm going to wipe this out. The second option is you've got a build sample macro option. Now what happens here is you give Midi Quest a file, a sample file of the type of data you have to work with, and let me find it here. There we go. There's my dx.syx format file. And Midi Quest will look at the file. If it can find what looks like the appropriate data within the file, it will create the correct macro for you, so you don't have to do anything. And you notice here, it's diskseek 7. So in the sample MIDIX file, the SYX file that I gave, the actual data was not at the very beginning of the file. It was 7 bytes into the file, and then it's reading again 4104 bytes and putting it into the Midi Quest location starting at byte 0. The final auto creation option you have is a no header unison macro, and if I click on that, you'll see a different macros created here. We know unison normally just stores the data. It doesn't store any of the header or tail information from a MIDI dump. So here you have a slightly different format macro that's created. Again, here you start at the very beginning of the file. In this case, you're only reading 4,098 bytes, and you're placing them at byte 6 in the data file, starting at byte 6 instead of a byte 0. That gives you the space for the 6-byte header that is required to send out a DX7 voice bank. Here you can type in any comment you want. So I could call it my DX7 voice bank MIDIX conversion macro, and then I have the option to save that conversion off the disk and give it whatever name I want. You can also simply open up conversions that you've already saved. You do that by first opening a file conversion window and making sure that it's active. So I'm going to actually open up a second one. And then if I go to open, I have a collection of various conversions here. And let's have a look at, here we go, D50. Here's an example of a more complicated macro. Midi Quest doesn't store data internally for a D50 identically to how it is stored in a D50 MIDIX format file. So in order to extract that data and load in a D50 bank, you've got to create a macro that looks like this. You set up some offsets. You've got to do a looped read of 135 times. Set a marker, disk seek, so set a marker into the file, read 256 bytes, and then advance your pointers and loop. So it steps through the file in 135 segments, reads a bit of the file, stores it in your Midi Quest file, and continues until it's done. Now to return to my DX7, this would allow me to convert a file saved by Unison. I want to return to my DX7 example. So I will do it a slightly different way this time. And here's another conversion option I have, and this is called build macro, and you can't see, but right now what I'm doing is going to the desktop and I'm grabbing my SYX file, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to drop it on that window. And what it does is there are 4 different drop options that tells the window what it should do when you drop a file on it. In this case, I have build macro set, so when I drop a file into the window, it loads up the file, looks at it, finds out how to create the conversion macro, and stores it right into the window. Let's look at a couple of the other options that are in here. Extension. As you saw, each time we added a new driver, the extension was automatically filled in with the default, but you can put in any extension you want, and this is the extension that Midi Quest will add for each file that you actually convert from whatever format it was previously in to Midi Quest format. So if I'm converting a MIDIX file, it's going to have a .syx extension, do the conversion, and Midi Quest will create a file with the same file name, but with a different, in this case, VBK extension. Now I have a couple of options down here. Convert entire folder, extract from MIDI file, and a query extension. So when I hit the convert button, normally you're going to get a file selector, and you choose a single file, and Midi Quest will convert that one file. Well, if you want to convert an entire folder of files, then you can choose this option, hit the convert button, and you could choose one file, but what Midi Quest actually does is look at all of the files. Now, if you've got a whole series of different files in your directory, right now by default there's an asterisk saying display all files, but you could change that to SYX, and now you see you would get a list of all your SYX files. You choose one, and if you have convert entire folder selected, it will actually convert all of the listed SYX files using this macro. The other option you can check is extract from MIDI file. This is a very special conversion because standard MIDI files containing SysX data are handled in a particular way, and this option gives the file conversion the smarts to go in and extract the data from a standard format MIDI file. Now let's have a look at the pop-up menu options. The first is compile, and what compile does is it allows you to test the macro you've written here that's supposed to do the conversion. If you choose compile and nothing happens, you have a valid conversion, no errors in it, and you can just proceed. However, if you've got some mistake in your conversion, you'll get an error message pop up, and you should deal with that error message before trying to convert any files. The next option, drop to, we've already discussed a little bit. There are 4 options, 4 different things Midi Quest can do from when you drop a file in this window. The first option is actually to open a SysX view window. So if I've chosen that option, I can actually now go and choose any file. Here I'm dragging in my SYX file, and Midi Quest will open up the file and give you a hex view of that file. This can be very useful if you're trying to analyze a file, find out where things are, and it's a little more open-ended than actually trying to open a file itself from the view option in Midi Quest XL. Because if I want, I can actually go and grab a PDF file and do the same thing. And there's a hex view of a PDF file that I've picked up from my computer. It allows you to do analysis, look at the file at its basic byte level. The next option is convert using macro. If I choose that, then what it's saying is any file that I drop on this window, and I can drop multiple files, they will automatically be converted into the Midi Quest, the equivalent Midi Quest file. So here I'm dropping my SYX file, it gets converted, and here is the file that I've just converted from an SYX format file to a Midi Quest format file. Now when this conversion happens, as I've mentioned already, you get the same format file name. All that happens is the extension gets changed and the new file gets placed back in the very same folder that the source file came from. So when you're doing conversions, if you're looking for your converted files, they're back with your source files. The next option is convert as MIDI file, and again choose this option. Then you can go and drag and drop a standard MIDI file that contains, in this case, DX7 voice bank data. Drop in this window, Midi Quest will do the conversion. Last option, build macro, we've already covered. It provides a file to the conversion window so that it can generate a conversion macro. Here's a manual way to load a file to the SysX view. I do this, I'll get a standard file selector up, and I can choose any file that I want. Here's a JPEG, and it will just load that in as data. Load driver from disk and load driver from list we've already also covered already. This allows you to load in a driver file from disk from your instrument definition area, and this gets a driver that is used for conversions right out of your studio window. The last thing to mention, if you find you do need to create a complex macro to do the conversion, you might want to talk to SoundQuest first. We may already have created a macro for the instrument, in which case we'll happily just send it to you. If not, you're going to need to start looking at all of the macro commands. They are all covered in Midi Quest's help file. Just go to the front page of the help file, and you can find all of the macro commands covered in there. Thank you for viewing.